How about some hate?
Hey, dude.
Yes.
I hate the fact that you have all the talents and all to get into Wall Street or get into a hedge fund, and I'm still struggling over here in college, trying to get ahead of my life.
How did I become successful? Is that your question?
Yes. I want to work in the same industry you're working on pharma, working on biology, and working on stocks at the same time. I want to be a millionaire, dude.
I think it's actually hard to not be a millionaire if you apply yourself.
How do I do it? You have the connections. I don't. I have to work my ass.
It's not about connections, man. You know, my family is from the poorest country, one of the poorest countries in the world, and
so do I.
And let me finish. And they came to America with no money, working odd jobs. We didn't have any connections. Where do you live? That's the first question I have.
All right, I used to live in Mexico until I turned 18. I moved to Southern California, and I moved to Boise, Idaho within the last year and a half.
That's the problem. You're in Idaho. Well, you can't make any connections in Idaho. You want to be rich, get out of Idaho. That's my advice to you, bro. Jesus Christ. Martin Shkreli. Oh, hold on. Let me put you on speaker. There you go. Hi.
Hey, Martin, sorry about that. Sorry about that early, though. I was a little bit upset, though. But, I mean, to be in a cool mood, seriously, how do you get your feet into those places like hedge funds or like Wall Street, though? Because, I mean, a lot of people have the knowledge of it.
I told you, don't live in Idaho. There's no hedge funds in Idaho. There's nothing in Idaho.
So what do you recommend?
Move to New York, sure. Good luck.
You know, CEOs are wildly. I fired about 20 CEOs in my life as an investor and an owner of businesses. I hire CEOs for a living. I'm actually looking to hire a CEO as we speak for one of my portfolio companies. So I think of myself more as an investor and maybe a very early stage entrepreneur than a late stage entrepreneur. And I think an early stage entrepreneur, I think I have basically the perfect qualifications. Late stage companies, like $1 billion plus companies, they often suffer from but still need sort of the older person in the room, if you will. And I think that it's why people hate work. It's why people find working at most companies draining and difficult and terrible, because they have no upward mobility. It's, run by a bunch of old people who don't know what they're doing, but are very conservative, and therefore the wheels won't fall off. So you have to pick what you want as an investor. You either want a person with passion and direction and the ability to be charismatic and bring people to new heights, and maybe at the same time they have all kinds of faults. They're not perfect. Or you can go for the conservative option where it's, people who are truly, kind of stuffed suits, and 90% of CEOs are that. I don't think anyone would question my entrepreneurship ability, but my ability to be a staid conservative CEO, it's just not who I am,
I really like you, and I try to defend you. I read or I listened to an interview where you talked about that AIDS medicine that the price was super jacked up on, and how you used some of your dividends or profits or whatever to improve that medicine.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about some of the ways that you did that, or how you improved it, or your company?
Sure. So I made a drug our company made a drug that is a much better inhibitor for DHFR. DHFR is the enzyme that Daraprim inhibits, thereby killing the toxoplasma infection. So the problem with Daraprim is it was invented 70 years ago, before modern chemistry and modern drug discovery techniques were in play. We didn't even have computers when Daraprim was invented, so we couldn't molecularly image or model the enzyme. So now we have all that, so it was pretty easy for us to go ahead and make a drug that only killed the toxoplasmosis and not kill the human enzyme. Humans also have this enzyme, and we use it to metabolize vitamin B6. So all organisms, anything alive, uses DHFR. So we made a drug that only hits the toxoplasma, the bug's enzyme, and doesn't hit the human's enzyme, which Daraprim doesn't do. So theoretically, you could actually take this drug and have no side effects, which if you have HIV or AIDS, you could even take this drug all the time to make sure you never get toxoplasmosis. So we think it's a huge improvement. Finally, most people have the latent form of toxoplasmosis. If you have toxoplasmosis, 20% of all Americans have it. So we think that there should be a way to kill the dormant bug, not just the bug that's killing you. So you could conceivably get rid of the bug before it kills you. In fact, if I had toxoplasmosis, I might have it because I have a cat. It's of the dormant kind. I'd rather not have it. I'd rather take a couple pills of Daraprim or whatever this new drug is going to be called and get rid of it. So there's been a lot of, 20% of all Americans have toxoplasma. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the reasons behind recent wage stagnation that haven't existed, in the past 3 decades or so?
Oh, I mean, it's 100% technology. The inflation for any good is a function of supply and demand and efficiency. And when you have technology that is creating, a greater supply, right, of labor, but through its efficiency, the number of people looking for jobs is not changing at a dramatic rate. The amount of work you can do, right, is increasing dramatically due to technology, and therefore wages have downward pressure. We're so used to upward pressure in wages and other goods, but things like computer prices and all these things are extremely deflationary, right? So I think that it's a simple thing that technology drives deflation, and we're sort of used to inflation in some aspects, but globalism also drives deflation. Egg prices have dropped 80%. It's kind of remarkable. You can farm eggs elsewhere for cheaper, and you don't need to do it in the U.S. And, price of software has dropped dramatically, and price of, thanks to the internet, communications costs, all these things are dropping at ridiculous rates. And the idea that wages should keep going up forever, it's crazy.
I can't really see how that, plays true for the average middle class worker who has a more substantial corporate job.
Yeah, well, how about an accountant? I mean, you needed 10 accountants to do the work of what one person can do with QuickBooks now, or SAP or whatever. I mean, it's just work is easier now. You can do more work with less people. It's just part of technology.
Do you think that's any result of increasing executive compensation?
No. People have been greedy since the dawn of civilization, dude. Everyone's always trying to make as much money as possible. Executive comp has always been balls to the wall as much as possible. I don't think it has anything to do with, the average worker's compensation. The average worker can do more with less, and that, by definition, is a deflationary phenomenon. So that's really, I think, the answer you're looking for.
I'm much more of a businessman than a scientist, no doubt. But I think that anytime you're in business, you have to understand exactly what you're doing, or you're going to make a lot of mistakes. For instance, I just started a software company, and amazingly, I looked at our GitHub where we host our company, and I've written 400,000 lines of code, shockingly, over the last 9 months. And I think it's just very hard to not. It's very hard to start a company and not have some sense for what it is that you're doing, because otherwise you end up in a place where I just think you end up in a place where you can't really lead effectively if you're at the very least somewhat versed in the field that you're going into. So I like to study the fields that I'm in. So when I do a healthcare company, I may not be the best chemist, I may not be the best biologist, but I don't want to be illiterate. And the same thing with software. I may not be the best programmer. There's a lot of really good programmers out there, but I also don't want to be totally illiterate when I go hire a developer from Twitter or a developer from Facebook or Google. I don't want to be, I want to be able to have dinner with them and talk to them about technology, not, just sort of not really be able to talk to them on their level, the top 20 pharmaceutical CEOs, I'd say maybe 2 know how many valence electrons nitrogen has, and let alone could tell you why stacking pi bonds is an important concept in medicinal chemistry. and I'm one of the few people in the pharmaceutical industry that's started companies, been the CEO, can actually tell you about drugs. The CEO of Merck is a lawyer. The CEO of Allergan's a lawyer. The CEO of Johnson & Johnson worked in consumer products. So, it's sort of pathetic if you ask me. In tech, often the CEOs were developers in the early days of their companies, and I think that's one of the reasons tech has done so well and healthcare kind of hasn't. I was looking at all the big pharma pipelines last night, and Merck doesn't have an interesting drug to speak of. To be fair, I mean, I make it relative to the size of the company. Merck has a Clostridium difficile drug that is not too bad. That's pretty exciting. There hasn't been a C. diff vaccine. It's a vaccine. C. diff vaccine in a while. They have a CMV antiviral, but it really, the star of their pipeline, they think, is this Alzheimer's drug. It's a BACE inhibitor. I don't think it's going to work. After that, you've got virtually nothing. I mean, one CMV antiviral and the C. diff drug, I don't think that's enough. And the C. diff drug got approved. It's called Zinplava. So in terms of pipeline, Merck's got almost nothing. I mean, really unproductive research. And their internal research has been terrible. I mean, the best they've come up with internally is this insomnia medicine, which is pathetic. 𝗪𝗠𝗪. You guys aren't familiar with that one. It's more natural sleep drug to compete with Ambien, but it's not too special. Pfizer's pipeline is pretty pathetic as well. Roche I was stunned last night reading the Roche pipeline. They have, it might be because Genentech, but the European companies seem to have so much better pipelines than the American ones. Roche, Novartis, but Merck and Pfizer, J&J has always had a decent pipeline. They do decent research.
Do you think that's something about Europe that makes the drug companies that better, or is it just
random? Sometimes each company's different. Roche and Novartis are very well run, but look at J&J has always had a good pipeline. They have ketamine for depression. They've just gotten like 4 or 5 great approvals. So J&J is somewhat well run. I don't know. Sometimes there's not that many huge drug companies, so just an observation more than a theory.
I'm sure this is a dumb question, but what's a pipeline?
It's just any drug you're working on before FDA approval. It takes so much resources to get FDA approval. You have to do clinical trials mostly. That's the resource. You got to prove that it works, and in real clinical trials, real head-to-head against placebo. And patient doesn't know, doctor doesn't know, and you test them, and if you don't prove it, you can't get approval.
Who actually runs the trials? Because it would be a bit biased if the company runs their own trials.
The company runs a trial with an outside company, but the doctor and patient are blinded to the result, and FDA audits the results. Yeah, American drug companies' pipelines aren't that great right now. Bristol Myers has kind of a pretty weak pipeline. Eli Lilly is a weak pipeline. Something's up. I think in general, big pharma's had a tough time innovating. There's just cancer is so crowded that everybody's in the cancer game, and a lot of the innovation comes from biotech, and the pharma just buys the biotech at the end. Pharma's had a really hard time kind of looking and feeling like biotech. It's a weird game. Amgen has a decent pipeline, I think. It's not great, but it's a little better than some of the other companies. Roche has like 3 different Alzheimer's drugs in the clinic. None of them look particularly amazing. But they have a hemophilia drug that looks incredible. They have a Parkinson's drug that is the first attempt at a real treatment for Parkinson's. It's not just 𝗨𝗧. They have interesting and innovative cancer mechanisms. They have the NaV1.7 pain drug that I mentioned. I think if NaV1.7 ever works, it'd be one of the biggest drugs ever sold, because people want to get off opioids so bad, but there's nothing. Pharmaceutical companies do some research. Universities do some research, and there's sort of a should be a happy marriage. I think the marriage should be a little happier, but universities do a lot of useless research too, whereas pharmaceutical companies pretty, direct with their research. So it's like, it's an ecosystem, you need both. You need the drug company that wants to commercialize innovation, and you need the researchers to sometimes do wasteful or research that probably will go down a dead end, but you never know, kind of research that drug companies just don't want to kind of take those kind of shots. Let's say you have a stock, it's moseying along, you decide the stock's a buy and it goes up, right? So you've been kind of long throughout this period. Right, green for your position, you're long. At some point you stop being long, so now you're just say black or you're neutral. Let's call that white, a white color. Maybe yellow. Yellow means hold, and right? And then you decide to flip to red. This is sort of more normal behavior, right? Because if you look at the price, find a different color. All right, so if you look at the price, like, all right, so here up to here, this is supposed to be a straight line. So you bought down here, and it's kind of you felt it was a buy, as long as it's in this blue box, which means basically up to this stock price. The more important part of the box is this line. Right up to here, it's a buy. You feel like at this price, you wouldn't buy it, right? Usually as things go up, we are less attracted to them, but that's not always true. And that after this price, right, the yellow line is really just a demarcation between yellow and red. Where above that price, you would sell it or even short it, right? So the thing that I just did, where I went from long in the green box, or the blue box, and I said, you know what, there is no yellow box, because as soon as it's above this price, I decided it's in the red box and I want to sell it and short it. That doesn't make much sense, because the yellow box represents what? The yellow box represents, to me at least, and this is my own method, nobody really talks about it this way. The yellow box represents basically uncertainty, right? This is basically your being uncertain. And I think there's nobody trading who is certain of anything, right? So the idea that like you've gone from having a long position down here in the green box, where you're convinced that something's long, it's over here. And then all of a sudden you're convinced it's a short just because it crosses this line. That doesn't make any sense, because there has to be some period where you actually don't care, you're neutral. Right now, the difference is if it gapped up quickly, so here's another stock price chart here, where it's moseying along, okay, try that one more time. It's moseying along, and then all of a sudden it gaps up like that, right? It's not gonna be the best. Let me try it again. Moseying along, and then it's a really steep increase. Well then, remember the x-axis is time. It may just not have spent much time in the yellow zone, nearly enough time that you would have time to even react. So then it feels like an instantaneous change is okay, because at this price you're willing to sort of change your mind. So
there's a great book called The Man Who Solved the Market. It's by a Wall Street Journal writer. His name escapes me at the moment, but the book is about Jim Simons, who's a computer programmer, and he was actually a code breaker at the place before they called it the NSA. So he was a math professor. He's very celebrated academic, and then he, at the age of 40, decided to do a complete career change and become a trader of all things. Well, he tried to trade and it didn't work. He tried to trade based on his instincts and information and things like that, and then he decided to program a computer to trade, and then the world changed. He single-handedly kind of ushered in this quantitative revolution. He wasn't the first guy to do it, but he was amongst the first, and he ended up creating one of the, if not basically the most successful hedge fund ever. He's the most successful investor of all time. And he's not a person that looks at balance sheets. He's not a person that looks at stock charts. He's a person that programmed or helped hire a team that programmed a computer to trade automatically. And he made the most amount of money in the stock market ever. More than Warren Buffett, more than George Soros, more than Steve Cohen, etc. Hash?
I believe they're called magicians.
Yeah, the fund made around 80% a year for a very long time. So Simons has the, arguably was one of the richest people in the world. If you sort of would securitize his company, it would be worth more than Goldman Sachs. So anyway, trading with a computer is probably kind of like, trading without a computer is probably kind of like being in professional sports or MMA without steroids. Like, you can try it, but most of those guys are doing steroids for a reason. And I think, in this case, you actually don't have the downsides of steroids, the health effects and so forth. So, you kind of have to do it at this point to keep up with the Joneses. Like, trading without computer help is almost like as crazy as, like, I don't know, doing your own spell checking or, whatever, like photocopying instead of, I don't know, pick any like archaic thing. Like, so the day of the stock picker that's like a gumshoe that's like looking at balance sheets and interviewing management, like, it's slowly starting to kind of go away, I think. And if you look at most of the successful hedge funds now, they're more quantitatively oriented, even if they're not completely computer decisions. The computers are making more and more part of that decision. So I highly recommend that you learn to program if you want to learn how to invest.
Hello.
Hey, what's going on, Martin?
Not much. Trying to play Rubik's Cube.
I was just wondering, when you go on these news shows, like I've seen you on Fox News, and I remember the one where when the EpiPen was rising prices.
Yeah.
Do they know that you're mostly being facetious and you're being serious, but they think everything you say is being, real. But, when you did the crossing of Harambe, do they notice any of that? Or do they just think, oh, he's just this
I
weird
think the angrier the liberal, the more that they're like, they just want an echo chamber. Like, I yelled at this woman, Laura Duca, today, who is the woman who went on Tucker Carlson, and kind of, honestly, like, I like Tucker a lot. It was a little embarrassing for both of them. I know that's not going to get me too many fans in the Tucker Carlson camp, but it's definitely more embarrassing for her than Tucker, in my opinion. There's people that just ideology is all that matters to them, and I don't know how there's anybody that, I just could never see myself being that kind of person, and there are just so many people like that out there, and I just, that's the kind of people you meet, and that's part of the media. It's part of reality, and you just have to deal with it.
Do you think they bring you on there to upset certain people?
I think it's a mix. For Tucker, I think he was trying to get at something that was important. For other shows, I do believe that they probably do, but it's like, just, again, it's one of these things that, it doesn't bother me, whether the person thinks I'm being facetious or not. People understand that if you are not getting a fair shake, you can make anybody look bad, and, the media can be pretty dishonest with respect to that. So I don't know, man.
It seems to me that when they brought you on for the EpiPen thing, and then they started talking about your meme on Harambe, I feel like they were trying their best to paint you in a bad light. I think you did your best to counteract a lot of it, but it seems to me that every time you go on like a news station or something, there's always like this bias against you, and it seems to me that they're, if they're going to bring you on, they might as well give you like a fair, They just treat you as the enemy, like right when you come on it. It's just weird to see.
Yeah, it's weird to live. It's just, it's life. What can you do? I'm not going to cry about it. They look bad when it happens. That's why Trump is president. People don't trust the media. People don't trust politicians. They, by not being reasonable. They've created and fostered an environment of distrust. And
Do you trust any of the media?
I think it's case specific. There's terrible stuff on Fox and there's great stuff on NBC sometimes. It's hard to paint it all in one stroke. I think that there's some good stuff if you look for it. I like the Wall Street Journal. They have a huge infrastructure. It's not just financial news. They do a good job. So, it's case specific. Anyway, I got to run, man.